Hey guys, Arik is here, your Russian coach, and your entrance ticket to this Russian lesson is your beautiful smile. Just relax, let go of the problems, smile, and let's start. You're going to enjoy it. Please open your learning materials. Церковный Раскол XVII Века, the church split of the 17th century. If you don't have these materials printed, you have the link below this video. But I really recommend that you print it out, because we will have to work on that very, very seriously. So, first of all, I'm going to show you where we're going to start from today, and I'm going to give you a little background of what has happened so far in this mysterious and super interesting historical plot, historical story. So, you need to find this paragraph, starting with «изменения кажутся». Изменения кажутся несущественными. Of course, you're going to get this paragraph 100% or close to that. Now, what we have learned so far about the split in the Orthodox Russian Church in the 17th century. We learned that there were two guys. I'm going to show you. Look at the screen, please. Patriarch Nikon и Протопоп Авакум. So, the patriarch Nikon and archpriest Avvakum. Those were the two main heroes, two main characters of this split. Now, there were several reasons of the reform in the Russian Church. The two reasons that have been mentioned is mistakes in the manuscripts of Holy Scriptures. That's one thing. And another thing is that Russia connected to itself, to its territory, certain Ukrainian lands. And the population of these Ukrainian lands were also Orthodox Christians, but of a different rite, of a different tradition. So they needed to unify them, And then Nikon, now who was Nikon? Remember, patriarch. The patriarch is the main person in the church. He suggested that the church undergoes a reform. And we learned several points of that reform. So I'm just going to remind you the points so that we align our thinking. I'm just going to read and translate. It's going to be a good opportunity for you to test your understanding from the previous lesson. So, the first point – редактура и унификация церковных книг на основании греческих первоисточников. So, editing and unification of the church books based on the Greek sources. Yeah, we learned that much more thoroughly the last time. You can watch the previous lesson. Next one – изменение порядка богослужения и крестного знамения. Креститься теперь следовало тремя, не двумя перстами. So, the changing of the order of the liturgy and the crossing. So, people had to cross themselves now with three and not with two fingers. You remember, перстами comes from персты, which is the obsolete term for fingers. Замена земных поклонов на поясные, we also explained that. So there was this the replacement of the earth bows where a person actually touched the earth, to the bows where the person just bended his body or her body in the waist, like at the waistline. And then вместо 7 просфор стали использовать 5. So instead of 7 prosphors, like the special bread, instead of 7 breads like that, they started to use 5. Next. Праздничный крестный ход с иконами предлагалось вести не по ходу, а против солнца. So the holiday procession with icons, it was offered to conduct not in the direction of, but contrary to the direction of the sun. And then Аллилуйя во время службы стало необходимым произносить 3 раза вместо 2. So Hallelujah during the service it became necessary to say 3 times instead of 2. Next one. По-другому стало писаться имя Христа. Иисус вместо Иисус. So differently started. That would be terrible English. I'm warning you. По-другому means differently. It became to write. Like literally to write itself. Писаться. The name of Christ. Иисус вместо Иисус. Instead of Иисус. So, like in the proper English, the name of Christ started to be written, писаться, to be written differently. Иисус instead of Иисус. Патриарх Никон продвигал также идею о главенстве церкви над светской властью. So, the patriarch Nikon advanced also the idea about the superiority of the church over the secular government or secular power. Он претендовал на роль соправителя царя. So he claimed for, remember, претендовал, he claimed for the role, or actually he claimed the role of a co-governor, правитель. Правитель means like governor, co-ruler of the Tsar. So that's where we stopped the last time. Now, let's continue. Now, from here on, we're going to analyze and we're going to dig very deep. Изменения кажутся несущественными, но для противников реформы, назвавших себя старообрядцами, они стали принципиальным вопросом. So let's see what is happening here. Let's go over the vocabulary. Изменения means changes. Кажутся, seem. Несущественными comes from несущественный, which is insignificant. So изменения кажутся несущественными would be the changes seem insignificant. Но для противников реформы, назвавших себя старообрядцами, but для противников. Противник means the opponent. But for the opponents of the reform, назвавших себя, that's past tense, of who called themselves. Назвавших себя, please underline, who called themselves. Старообрядцами, that's the old believers. Старообрядцами, the old believers. Они стали, so they became, принципиальным, the principal, вопросом, question. Вопрос, right? Probably know that. So, now let's see how it all works together in one sentence. Изменения кажутся несущественными, но для противников реформы, назвавших себя старообрядцами, они стали принципиальным вопросом. The changes seem insignificant, but for the opponents of the reform, calling themselves old believers, they, meaning the changes, they became the principal question. Конфликт зашел так далеко, что на Большой Московский собор 1667 года лично явился Константинопольский патриарх Паисий, чтобы назвать староверов еретиками и мятежниками. Okay, guys, so let's work on the vocabulary. So зашел means entered. Therefore, конфликт зашел так далеко. Literally, that would be the conflict. Entered so far. Because tak here acts as so. But actually, we would probably say in English, the conflict advanced so far. Yeah? Что на Большой Московский собор. Do you remember собор was council? So Большой Московский собор, the big Moscow council, means council of the church. Лично means personally. Явился, appeared. Чтобы, in order to, назвать, to call, староверов, so староверы means the old believers, еретиками, the heretics, и мятежниками, and rebels. So мятежник means a rebel. Мятежниками, rebels. So now please see how it all works together here. Конфликт зашел так далеко, что на Большой Московский собор 1666-1667 года лично явился Константинопольский патриарх Паисий, чтобы назвать староверов еретиками и мятежниками. The conflict advanced so far that like 4 or 2 to the big Moscow council of such and such year, personally appeared the Constantinople Patriarch Paisy, чтобы, in order to, назвать, call, in order to call the old believers, heretics, and rebels. I'm going to read it to you again, just follow me. Конфликт зашел так далеко, что на Большой Московский собор 1666-1667 года лично явился Константинопольский патриарх Паисий, чтобы назвать староверов еретиками и мятежниками. The conflict advanced so far that for the big Moscow council of such and such year, in person appeared the Constantinople Patriarch Paisy, like in Russian Paisy, in order to call the old believers heretics and rebels. Interesting, huh? Very interesting. So I'm going to read this whole paragraph now without translation. That's going to be a little quiz for you to measure, to evaluate your understanding. Just listen. Изменения кажутся несущественными, но для противников реформы, назвавших себя старообрядцами, они стали принципиальным вопросом. Конфликт зашел так далеко, что на Большой Московский собор 1666-1667 года лично явился Константинопольский патриарх Паисий, чтобы назвать староверов еретиками и мятежниками. So how do you feel, guys? And that's advanced Russian for you. That's non-adapted, real Russian, aimed at Russian-speaking population. Now, the next title is as follows. Последствия церковного раскола. Please underline the word последствия if you're not familiar. And that's consequences. The consequences of the church split. And they're saying the following. Тем временем у противников реформы появился лидер, протопоп Аввакум, который повел за собой людей и не побоялся даже смертной казни, защищая старые порядки. So, let's start working on this sentence. Тем временем means meanwhile. У противников реформы. So, what was противники? Remember, противники was the opponents. Противник means the opponent. So, у противников реформы появился, appeared. So, literally, у противников реформы появился, we would translate like to the opponents of the reform appeared. But in the proper English, that would be like the opponents of the reform had. Протопоп, archpriest, Аввакум, который повел за собой людей, which повел за собой means led after him, because повел means led, and за собой after him, which led after him. It's also not really in English, but you get it, right? He led with the people going after him. He led after him people и не побоялся даже смертной казни. Не побоялся and wasn't afraid of даже. Смертной казни means like capital punishment or execution. Yeah? Смертной казнь. So смертная казнь means capital punishment. Защищая comes from защищать, which means to defend. And порядки here, in this context, means regulations or rules. In other context, порядок would be order, like place, like things are in order. But in this case, these are rules or regulations. So now please see how it all works together. Тем временем у противников реформы появился лидер, протопоп Авакум, который повел за собой людей и не побоялся даже смертной казни, защищая старые порядки. Meanwhile, the opponents of the reform had their leader, an archpriest, Avacum, who led after him people, after him, and wasn't afraid even of the capital punishment, defending the old rules or regulations. Его сторонники утверждали, что новые обряды уничтожат веру и сложившиеся традиции. Сторонники means supporters. So his supporters, you know what утверждали means? Утверждали means claimed. So his supporters claimed, что новые обряды means rites, R-I-T-E-S, that the new rites уничтожат веру. Уничтожат comes from уничтожить. And уничтожить means to destroy. So they claimed that что новые обряды уничтожат веру. That would be so. They claimed that new rites will destroy the faith. Вера, faith. И сложившиеся традиции. So традиции means traditions. Сложившиеся means... I'll check the exact English word for that. So that's established. Established is a good word for that. Сложившиеся, please underline. That's established. So его сторонники утверждали, что новые обряды уничтожат веру и сложившиеся традиции. We are talking about Avacum, who held a very high status of archpriest. So his supporters claimed that the new rites will destroy the faith and the established traditions. Среди них находились и известные личности. So личности would be personalities. Среди них, among them. Находились basically means, so in certain context, находиться would be to be located. But находились here means just were. And известные, well known. So среди них находились и известные личности. So among them, meaning among his сторонников, which is supporters. So among them, among the supporters of Avacum, находились и известные личности. There were also, also famous people or famous personalities, well-known personalities. Одной из них была Феодосия Прокопьевна Морозова, которую в итоге лишили имущества, сослали и уморили голодом. Одной из них была, one of the well-known personalities, one of them were, right? Была means were, that's the name, Феодосия Прокопьевна Морозова, которую в итоге, которую means who, or whom actually, whom, в итоге means finally, лишили имущества. So лишить means to strip of something, like to take something using power. So So they're talking about this woman here, Феодосия Прокофьевна Морозова, которую в итоге лишили имущества, who finally, there is no they here, but we can infer that, who finally they stripped of her possessions. So имущество comes from имущество with o at the end, and that's possessions. Сослали means sent to the exiled. И уморили голодом. Уморили голодом basically means starved to death. That's an expression. Please underline, because голод means hunger or starvation. And уморили, basically it means they killed her. Yeah, but it's not a very common word nowadays. So, уморили голодом would basically mean they caused her to die from hunger. So they're talking now about the supporters of Протопоп, of archpriest Авакум. Среди них находились известные личности. So among them were also famous people. Одной из них была Феодосия Прокопьевна Морозова. One of them were Феодосия Прокопьевна Морозова, которую в итоге лишили имущества, so whom finally, в итоге, they stripped off the possessions, сослали, sent into exile, и уморили голодом, and starved to death. Старообрядцев арестовывали и сжигали на кострах. So, literally, the old believers, they arrested, but in English, they would arrest. They would arrest the old believers, meaning the establishment, yeah? The establishment. So, but старообрядцев арестовывали, so they would arrest the old believers. И сжигали на кострах, and would burn, meaning burn them, on the fires. Yeah, on the fire. Because на кострах comes from костер, which is a bonfire. So a plural would be костры, and on the bonfires, that would be на кострах. So старообрядцев арестовывали и сжигали на кострах. So they would arrest and burn on bonfires the old believers. Тем не менее, на их сторону переходили целые монастыри. So, тем не менее, nevertheless. Тем не менее, nevertheless. На их сторону, to their side. Переходили, переходить means move. Переходить means to move. Переходили means moved in the past. Целые means whole. Монастыри, monasteries. So, what does it mean? Тем не менее, на их сторону переходили целые монастыри. So, nevertheless, to their side, switched or moved whole monasteries. Так, Соловецкий монастырь в 1668-1676 пережил протесты насельников. Actually, in reading, I think that would be more proper to read в 1668-1676 годах. And then годах means like годы, which is years. Yeah, so that would be better in reading. So let's go over that. Так means so. Соловецкий монастырь, so it's just the name of a monastery. Пережил, lived through. Протесты, protests. And насельников comes from насельники. Насельник is a person permanently living in a monastery. Mostly those are monks. Monks or people who want to be monks. So, так. So, насельников, we will just translate that as residents of the monasteries. Так, Соловецкий монастырь в 1668-1676 годах пережил протесты насельников. So, this Solovetsky monastery during such and such years lived through the protests of the residents. Их долго преследовали. So, them. I'll translate it first literally, and then you will get the structure. So, их means them. Долго, a long time. Преследовали would be persecuted. Преследовали. So, them, a long time, persecuted. So, in the proper English, we would say the authorities. There is no authorities here, but but we can infer that. The authorities persecuted them, meaning those rebels from the monasteries. Persecuted them for a long time. But in Russian, them, a long time, persecuted. Yeah? Okay, cool. So now please listen to this whole paragraph, and you will surprise yourself. Тем временем у противников реформы появился лидер, протопоп Аввакум, который повел за собой людей и не побоялся даже смертной казни, защищая старые порядки. Его сторонники утверждали, что новые обряды уничтожат веру и сложившиеся традиции. Среди них находились и известные личности. Одной из них была Феодосия Прокопьевна Морозова, которую в итоге лишили имущества, сослали и уморили голодом. Старообрядцев арестовывали и сжигали на кострах. Тем не менее, на их сторону переходили целые монастыри. Так, Соловецкий монастырь в 1668-1676 годах пережил протесты насельников. Их долго преследовали. Okay, guys, thank you so much. We'll see each other at the next lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and like this video. This way, many more people will be exposed to this content and you will get notified. Ciao, ciao.